Hello, welcome to the weekend review. My name's Anthony McGuire, and I'm sitting in the host seat again as Sean is unavailable this week, joined by my comrade Paul. We'll be reviewing Hibernian 0, Celtic 0. Paul, tell me about your weekend. How was it, mate?
Yeah, it was really good actually, despite a pretty average Celtic result. It wasn't the only thing that defined my weekend. I was in Sydney, just got back this afternoon. I think I mentioned it on last show. Seeing Paul McCartney on Friday night, which was it lived up to everything I hoped it would be and more. Bunch of Beatles tracks, so that was pretty special. Caught up with a mate at that I've not seen in 4 or 5 years, so that was a really good catch up. And then the following day, I got to spend the afternoon and a good chunk of the evening with a few beers with one of my best mates. So, yeah, the kind of stuff that you do stuff. That stuff makes life a little bit special. So I didn't actually get around to seeing the game until Sunday because it was the early hours of Sydney, and I was extremely drunk by that point and fast asleep. So I watched it without knowing the score live on Sunday, which was about as enjoyable as you would imagine with a reasonably big hangover. But apart from the game, everything else about the weekend was really good. But I understand not such a great weekend for yourself, mate.
No, mate. I'm sad to say that my little white cat doodle passed away the early hours of Saturday morning. He was 13. It was just sort of all rather sudden. He had a few health issues, but it kind of all just, like I said, just happened all very, very, very quickly. And no longer with us, so I'm quite a bit sad. And we'll get there. And he's survived by his younger brother Monty, who occasionally features on this podcast. You hear him yelling down the hallway, so I'm sure at some point that may very well happen tonight. But yeah, thanks, mate. And I'm glad that Sir Paul lived up to his reputation, because that would be a concert of a lifetime. And, he's not getting any younger either. So, I mean, you got to take these opportunities when they present themselves.
He did finish the show by saying, "See you next time," which I thought was pretty bold of a man of 81 years old and hasn't been on these shores for 6 years. So I don't know if he's fancying another trip back down under. But regardless of where you are in the world, if you get an opportunity to see Paul McCartney and you are a Beatles fan or maybe a Wings fan more than a Beatles fan, it seems unlikely, but Alan Partridge was. Partridge quote was it? Wings, the band the Beatles could have been. So if you're a fan of the Beatles and you get a chance to see McCartney, by all means, try and get along. It's absolutely worth it.
I kind of wish we'd incorporated a Beatles reference in our title, but we've gone with European Hangover in Leith as a little spin on the Proclaimers classic. It was a bit of a laboured performance by Celtic on the weekend. It had to be said. I probably was quite amazed to be awake, to be honest. I didn't really obviously sleep very well Friday night, so getting into sort of Saturday night, 10 o'clock Perth time. It was obviously a lot later for you over in Sydney, Paul, but it was laborious, I'd say. It was just very one-paced. Again, the warning signs were there early doors when we were just passing side to side, Scales to CCV, out to the fullback, back into the centre half, out to the other centre half, out to the other fullback, back to the centre half. And that sort of pattern of play really sort of dominated, particularly the first 60 minutes of the match at least. Probably our best chances in the first half coming from David Marshall trying to do his best Joe Hart impersonation, I guess, trying to play it out from the back, but not like, early Joe Hart when he wasn't really sure what he was doing. It was the game was devoid of chances. Like Hibs didn't create anything in the first half that I can recall. And then that one chance with Martin Boyle in the second, but just didn't really trouble David Marshall all that much. And then, you make your substitutions, and obviously there's been a lot of talk online about their caliber and who came off the bench. But I personally did feel that we had obviously a bit of a late rally and a bit of a flurry and created a few actual chances, but unfortunately just not to be hitting the woodwork. And Marshall pulling a couple of decent saves. So, it ends up nothing each. And and you sort of think, well, was that expected? Because we've been playing away in the league. Feels like we haven't had a home game in ages. And, we put in an absolutely epic performance against Atletico Madrid, which, again, I tipped 2 each last week. But again, it was one of those games where I think, Paul, you sort of feel that we could have got something. We should have, should have 3 points from that game. And, it's just, again, it was, you turn to the bench and you just, you can see that Brendan Rodgers is having issues there, and he's struggling or doesn't trust what's there at the moment. And that is a concern. And again, something we'll get into. So, Paul, I mean, you've got the benefit of fresh eyes and a slight hangover the next day. How did you see the game overall?
Yeah, pretty similar to how you did. The change up in pace for me, Roger said, I think he said something like 20, 25 minutes before we stepped up. I didn't take an I was surprised, but I wasn't taking actual notes during it. But it felt later than that for me. It felt like more like 15, and it was a bit of a sort of like not kind of like a panic that we were kind of throwing the kitchen sink at it later. And I'm just like, why are we waiting that late? Like, even with tired players, and there was a lot of talk online and in our group chats for the Celtic Down Under group chats saying, oh, why was there no changes? I said it on the group chat, and I'll say it again. I wasn't surprised in the slightest. I was pretty drunk when I made that comment, but I wasn't, because he was so reluctant to go to his bench on Wednesday night when it was clear there was guys dead on their feet at 60, 65 minutes, and a lot of them finished the match, and some of them lasted another 5, 10, 15 minutes beyond, when you could clearly see they were gassed. So even though it was only like a 2.5, 3 day turnaround, they are professional players, right? They're used to playing 2 games, or they should be used to playing 2 games a week. The challenge we've got is some of those guys aren't. Like Bernardo came off the bench after a few minutes, played, most of the game, and then was asked to go again a few days out. And I get it. He was obviously his first pick on Wednesday, and presumably he thinks that's the most likely replacement for Hatate, who I think we now hear is out until turn of the year, potentially, give or take. Hamstring, which again, not a surprise. You saw how distraught he was. Players tend to know how bad those are, and he looked pretty upset. So there's a lot to be said about the who you pick, and we've talked a lot about Ange used to sort of flog his players a bit and go back to the same players for the first 60, 65 minutes, and I feel like that's because he had his preference, but he had quality from the bench. Now we've got the situation where we've got preference, but not enough quality from the bench. But I still don't see how. It was clear that Hibs were going to set the stall out early doors. They had no intention of coming out and playing. They left pace wide. They dropped Venti onto McGregor to upset him, so they sort of sacrificed one of their front 3, and then they had pace from Ioan and Boyle, and it was clearly their main tactic was to hope and spring us on the counter. To be fair, they never really got opportunities to that because we're so one-paced. We never rarely committed ourselves far enough forward that they could then sort of turn us over. And I just thought like, if you know your players are a bit gassed, try and blitz them in the first 15 minutes. Try and get a couple of goals ahead in the first 15 minutes, and then you can bring the cavalry on at even half time and shut up shop. Like, we've talked a lot about Rodgers being a smart tactical manager. He is capable of setting a team up against somebody like Hibs and shutting shop at 1 or 2-0, and playing out a half pretty comfortably and letting them come and knock on the door, which I doubt. They would have played exactly the same. They'd have tried to invite us on and try to hit on the counter if we were. So I don't know. It just seems super flat. But the biggest thing for me, right through the game, from first pick players to substitutes, decision making was shit. Absolutely shocking. The amount of times players had 1 or 2 or 3 choices to make, and it was a wrong choice every single time in terms of trying something overly complicated, or shooting where there was somebody inside them for a layoff that would have had a much better chance. Players try to play Hollywood passes that were, and Palmer was guilty. Most of the front three at both times, first lot and second lot, had challenges. Turnbull with that, Hollywood attempted chip near the end, like what are the percentage chances of that one coming off?
Yeah,
It's just daft stuff like that. Like even stuff like Forrest right at the death, trying to turn that shot in from being well past the front post. Just dummy it. Like it causes mayhem. It could break. You're never going to score from that angle. And he's an experienced player. The least you expect is him to make, smart choices, better decisions. And I think, you can say like some of the players were tired, but their decision making was poor, and then the players that came off the bench, more often than not, their decision making was really poor as well. And I just felt like it was just one of those games, and there's nothing wrong with that. It happened, obviously, the St Mirren game, we got beat 2-0. At least we only dropped 2 points as opposed to 3, and in the bigger picture, in the context, there isn't too much to be concerned about, in terms of where we currently sit. But we have to fight. We've got 3 more of these big matches. We have to find a way to go Tuesday, Saturday, or Wednesday, Saturday, more than is currently the case.
The just give you the stats for the game. So we had 4 shots on target to 1, 10 off target to 4. We had 71% possession, 6 corners to 3, 1 offside each, 12 fouls to 4. Again, how does that work when you've got like... And we'll get on to Alan Muir as well. Don't forget, we will come back to him. And we end up with 2 yellow cards. And they end up with none. Pick up a couple of your points there, Paul. I am genuinely concerned how our attacking sort of that shift from defense to attack seems to lack that bit of zip when Hatate's not in the team. I thought Bernardo played well. I thought he was one of the better players. Obviously, he blew a gasket and he came off, and that's understandable. Like the guy's played no minutes and then has basically played, he's 2 full games or near enough in the space of a week. So I totally get why he came off, but I guess he's a slightly different player to Hatate, like just more defensively minded, and then that sort of flair or that sort of forward pass or that pass that splits the defense or the run that splits the defense, it just didn't seem to happen. And I think part of that's you're right. The way Hibs set up, they had the 3 sort of three in midfield. So Jago, the other centre midfield, then obviously the forward that sort of sat in McGregor and basically prevented McGregor, O'Reilly, and Bernardo really to sort of get the ball on the turn. So all they were doing was just playing triangles because they had somebody up their backside pretty much every time they got the ball. So, like I said, our best chances in the first half came when Hibs coughed up possession from forward pressure sort of thing because they were trying to play it from the back. But when we can't get McGregor on the ball, we struggle. It happened against St Mirren when we drew. It's happened a couple of times this season. The Kilmarnock game, same deal when we lost in the League Cup. If McGregor can't get on the ball and get moving forward with it, we seem to not have a plan B in that situation. I felt we also appeared to be quite narrow. And part of that's obviously AJ going off after 24 minutes with a head knock. I'll just say it was absolutely ridiculous that he got back on the park. He was totally like textbook concussion from like he went down, didn't get up, and then it took him ages to get up. I mean, how is any sports trainer doctor then saying, yeah, he's okay to go back on the park, see how it goes? It should have been, for me, it was an immediate substitution. I don't understand that. Like, Peter Grant's saying, oh, he's not knocked out. It's like, it doesn't matter. Like, okay, he's not like knocked out, but he's still like, he's not getting up. He's clearly concussed. Like, it's just, and he went back on, and then play went on for a couple of minutes, and he went down again. It's just like you can end up doing even more damage. It's just, I just wish football would just sort this out and just, and I'm actually amazed that Chris Sutton didn't tweet about it, because normally whenever there's a head injury, Chris Sutton's the first, whether it be, Celtic or, English Premier League or whatever, but he's usually first all over it. But I didn't see him tweet in this situation. But yeah, for me, that's just, it's silly. So he comes off eventually, and then we get Ralston on, and then Ralston's short of minutes as well. So he wasn't really at his best. He played sort of within himself, I felt. And then you had Taylor tucking in on the left, which he tends to do. And I just kind of felt like, well, if you're congested in the middle of the park, then surely you've got to be using your width to try and sort of get around it and stretch Hibs. But it seemed to be every time it had to go through the centre halves, and play just sort of gradually just shifted from side to side. And it just didn't really stretch Hibs to any real degree. It didn't look like they were tiring from not having the ball. Because, I mean, you think only having 27% possession or whatever, they'd be knackered by the end of the game, but they looked all right because we weren't moving it around quick enough to really, really test them and stretch them. So that's a concern. And you flip that back a week ago when we played Hearts, we started really, really well. And all right, we scored in the first 4 minutes. That doesn't happen all the time, but we were on from the first kick. Whereas on Saturday, we were just, like I said, we were very torturous and slow right from the off. And like you say, Paul, you're absolutely right. Put in a shift for 45 minutes, you're 2 goals up. Very rarely a team's going to come back from that and really threaten you. Like, they didn't. They had that one chance the second half. The ball came across and Boyle, slid in and skied it way over the bar. And that was the only highlight that came in the highlights reel. And for me, in memory, it was the only chance that they really created. Hart didn't have anything else to do. So defensively, fine, but possession's great, but you've got to do something with the ball. And we were definitely guilty of that. I guess the question is, Paul, how would you have freshened that team up? I know, like, in an ideal world, right, you've played a really hard game on a Wednesday. It'd be nice to maybe put 1 or 2 changes in just to freshen it up a bit. Ange got caught out last season. He made 3 changes and it all went to crap against St Mirren. But you'd say maybe 2 changes is maybe like the optimal thing to freshen it up. But at the moment, with the squad that we have available, is there anybody that you feel, any thoughts on how you would have freshened it up? I mean, I know that was the call from our group chat. It was like, oh, I can't believe he's picked the same team. But I kind of felt the team picked itself. But I'm curious to get your thoughts on that.
I think the overlay is, obviously we don't know which players were most negatively impacted by the previous fixture or maybe even ongoing fixtures in terms of fatigue, little niggles, any of those other things. But asking Bernardo to go to the well twice in such close proximity to me seems a bit daft, right? Yes, he needs minutes, but at the end of the day, it's a super intense. Like what he had, we know he all this. The thing, there was the stats that came out. He had the most pressures, 44 pressures in the time he was on the pitch in the Atletico game. So he got himself around the park. He put a shift in. I don't know where home is. Like,
yeah, he was on the bench. Yeah,
no. So obviously, he's sort of dropped out of contention after he got his red card against Feyenoord, and obviously he's going to be suspended by then. I don't know, like, especially now that Hatati's gone, you think he comes back into the reckoning. For me, the two choices you could have done: bring in Tomoki Owata and push McGregor further forward, seems a pretty obvious option, or bring Home back into the fold, leave McGregor where he is. Either of those gives you an opportunity to freshen up. But, if Bernardo takes that chance away in the first half when he just pulls it slightly beyond the post, then it's a different conversation, right? Where he scored the goal, we're up 1-0, and we probably go on and secure the points from there. That's one. Beyond that, it's difficult to say. Like, I thought Palmer had a really poor game, but the 3 wingers that are an option, none of them are covering themselves in any kind of glory in terms of really pushing forward. We know that Forrest's he's past his best, right? he
He
probably was the
doesn't
most
really
threat.
play like a winger. Like he cuts
No,
in
he cuts
every
in.
time. Every time. It's like, I know that you haven't got the pace, mate, but like you kind of still have to mix it up from time to time. Like, and then that was part feeding out the problem because Ralston wasn't really getting forward as much as he would normally do. So you got Forrest cutting in the second half when he came off the bench, and then Ralston just sort of sitting behind him, and there was just nothing on that whole wing. And then you were getting Matt O'Reilly or someone going out there, and it's like that's just crying out for a fullback to overlap. And yeah, it's just I mean, it's obviously a shame you lose age. I mean, that's unplanned, and you're not expecting that and that. But we should have enough to cover that.
When Ralston was at his peak 18 months ago, before the last injury, he was providing that width. He was bombing on. He was producing better crosses into the box than Alistair Johnson has been doing of late. And he was a genuine threat. But yeah, he's not had minutes on us. It's hard to be too critical. The one thing I'll say about Ralston, while we've got him, he didn't really. It's a bit like we saw a bit of this last season with guys like Haksabanovic. You're not going to get as many minutes if you're not the first pick in the jersey. So when you get an opportunity, you've got to grab it, and you've got to really make, show a bit more. And he didn't really. I actually think he was a bit lucky. He could have been off. There's two strong shouts for a yellow card. And I would not have been surprised for him to get booked for either of them. And then he'd have been on his way. The first one, for me, is a definite yellow. And he plays the old first foul, and the ref shows a bit of leniency. And then the second one, where he sort of steams in and sort of charges the guy and clips him as well. Did he get booked for that? I think, did he get booked for that? Did he get away with that one as well? I think he might have got away with that one as well.
I'll tell you in a second.
But
no, he got away with that.
I think he got away with that as well, right?
Yeah.
So I think he's dodged 2 bullets there. So as bad as Muir was, and he was fucking awful, I think he was just awful, right? Because that's a pretty clear example where it would have not surprised me for a yellow to be flashed for either of those challenges, and it stayed in the pocket. My biggest grievance with Muir, to be honest, was that he was just in the way all the time.
Oh, that one was fair the ball on the edge of the box, and he's just trapped it. I mean, why are you there? Like, your positioning is so bad. And there was another time he blocked the pass. Like, you saw the Celtic player wanted to play the pass, but saw the referee was in the way and then didn't play that pass. And it's like, you're kidding. Like, this is supposed to be the top flight in Scotland, and this is the best you got is this guy. And then, like you say, oh, that's your first foul, I'll let you off with it. When it was, we got lucky in that regard, but that should be a yellow card. I mean, if she was on the other foot, we'd be crying for murder. We'd be saying, like, where's the yellow card, But then you wonder why we go into Europe and we give away free kicks left, right, and centre, and we get half our team booked and fucking players sent off, because clearly how they referee games Scotland is not the European sort of standard. Because what the referee was blown up for in the European game midweek, that had been play on in Scotland. Some of that stuff was just like, it was very technical and very like, oh, he's just all right. It's a free kick to the letter of the law. But in Scotland, that'd just be like, play on. And it must be hard for the players to adjust to that, because if you're used to a certain amount of rough and tumble, and then all of a sudden you can't do that, it must be difficult to adjust. That's what I want to say.
One of my grievances is just the incomprehensible decisions he made as well. Like, 2 players come together, it clearly looks like a foul one direction, and he's given the foul in the opposite. Like, just daft stuff. Like, players like nudging people in the back, they go down, and then it's a foul the other way. There was that one, the Hibs guy sort of leant on top of him and fell on top of the Celtic player, and he gave a foul to Hibs. I was like, I have no idea what.
Well,
that
wasn't isolated. That wasn't isolated to Easter Road either. But we'll come to that a wee bit later on. Anyway, but I guess I probably may as well touch on the other 2 substitutes. We've obviously spoke about James Forrest and Anthony Ralston. So the other 2 substitutes were David Turnbull, who came on for Bernardo, and then Mikey Johnson. At what point do you stop becoming Mikey and you become Michael? Like, is there past a certain age where you're not called Mikey anymore, or is he going to be Mikey until he's like, old and grey? It's just a thought. Anyway, but Mikey came on for, I wanted to say Silva, but for Parma. my running gaff. And I'm going to be a little bit, well, I might be controversial given how Twitter's judging it, but I actually thought Mikey Johnson did all right. I thought, first time we've seen him in a Celtic jersey in how long? What, 2 years? 2.5 years? That season, he was there the last time. He was pretty much injured the whole season. But he created 3 chances. He had the shot. It was decent. Keeper, Marshall put a really good save. He definitely skinned that right back 2 or 3 times that Palmer couldn't get past him pretty much all day. Yeah, he gave the ball away in a bad position once, I can remember. But I thought he was pretty lively. I'm not saying he's the answer. I'm not saying that, he's the guy and, let's play him next week. But I think Celtic fans were a wee bit like, on paper, that's just Mikey Johnson, or like he's never going to rise above his station sort of thing. But I think you sometimes have to just judge the performance on the performance and just take the name away and say, well, how did he play? I actually think he did all right. I thought we sprung to life. And I think part of that was it was all going down the left because obviously Forrest was kept cutting in on the right. So, I personally don't think he played that bad. I thought, he created some chances. He came on and did what he was supposed to do. But I just think he gets pelters because he's Mikey Johnson. Paul, am I out of line or?
As usual, the truth lies somewhere in the middle, right? So I fair attempts to defend him, and there was a couple of things that were positive, but equally when he's already, I guess it's hard to take them away from the context, right? How long has he been on the fringes or around the first team? 6 years or something. Obviously, he's been out on loan a couple of times, and he's never made that jump. And I would be extremely surprised if this is the season that he becomes a breakthrough Celtic quality player, right? But where if he can somehow be a supportive player off the bench, probably about as much as we can hope for. The other thing is, people are going to be unfair on him because of his past record. You're right, first minutes in Celtic shirt for ages, and he looked rusty. No, like when you get the ball and you pass it straight out, and he was lucky that the camera missed it, but Peter Grant quickly told us what had happened because you could tell something bad had happened because the crowd were jeering it. But yeah,
was that between Peter Grant telling you that he coached Matt O'Reilly at some point in his career?
And he knows his
mentions that once every single time.
I don't know if you're aware, but he knows Matt's family too, right? So,
I'm sorry, Aaron.
Just had that throw in came to him, and he just passed it straight out of play. You're right. He did skin the fullback a couple of times. One of the times he skinned him so well, he forgot where the byline was, and he was out past the edge of the pitch. Look, it's frustrating. That's the thing, and that's why a lot of Celtic fans won't cut him any slack because they feel like they've seen the movie before. He's like a lot. Like, unfortunately, this is a thing that is sometimes a lot the case with wingers is a bit style over substance. They'll beat a man, they'll look good, they might beat the man again.
Yeah,
look Yang, right? Yang's a good example, right? Yang looked lively first few games. He had a great assist for the O'Reilly goal at Pataudry, and we all thought, oh, this might be a player, and he's obviously MVP in Korea and stuff. So you think, and then and look, we're not writing him off. He's 21 or whatever. He's still adjusting to life in a new country and all of that. But there's not really been any kick on. In fact, he's sort of faded a bit from the picture. And the games he's had since then, it's been a bit style over substance, right? He'll look good, a bit lively, but there's no real end product. And that's been a lot of Mikey Johnson's issue down the years. Like, he'll do a trick, he'll beat a man, he might try and beat him again. He cuts in. Like, one of his first shot, I think, went out for a throw.
Yeah.
So it's just, I get he's not played for a while, but he must be hitting shots like that in training, right? So I'm sure they're not all hitting.
He scored against Gibraltar, so
the corner flag. Yeah, of course, we hear it. So look, the shot that he actually, like, if we stick to a half decent analysis instead of pillar on him, the shot that he hits that Marshall does really, really well to claw away is a really, really good strike. There's almost no backlift. Matt O'Reilly plays a brilliant square ball from pretty much the touchline. In fact, they're in the positions that each other should be in. You know, O'Reilly's hugging the touchline, and Johnson's in on the edge of the D, which you probably expect that to be vice versa. And Matty finds him with a brilliant flat ball, but it's sort of right under his feet, and he sort of digs it out with hardly any back lift, and it's a really, really good strike, particularly on the back of the fact he's probably had 2 or 3 wild shots before then that have been over the bar, out for a throw in. He's run the ball out of play, and look, some of that is going to be like an over eagerness to, you know, to do,
Impress.
because he knows time's running out for him, right? And it still might happen, like to some degree. You look at Scales. There's no better example of a player you think is so far out of the picture and is suddenly nailed a jersey down, at least for now.
Anthony Ralston before him. I mean,
Yeah, it happens. Okay,
it
so
can happen.
it can happen. But I think with all of these examples, it will happen in a pocket of time whilst we've got issues with strength and depth. I'm on record as saying Scales isn't the answer, and I don't think he will prove to be the answer long term. I'll get called negative for that view. And he's done a brilliant job, no doubt about it. But
he's doing a job.
He's doing a job. But he had a wobbly spell. In about the space of 3 or 4 minutes, he made 3 key errors, and we nearly got punished for the last one, which he got well out of position and under the ball for the Boyle chance.
Yeah.
And I think he was, because he was rattled by that point. I think he had a foul. I think he maybe got booked, you know, and then there was one really bad pass he gave away, like real simple pass. He just gave it away. And then the third one was just getting all over the place in terms of where he should be. Like he's come way into CCV's zone there. And he's just completely lost both Boyle and the flight of the ball. And yeah, Boyle should tuck that away all day long. It's a brilliant chance. It's arguably the chance of the game. The only one that comes close to my view is the Maeda one, which again Marshall makes a fantastic save.
It's a really good save. It's very instinctive.
You know, you can't. You know, people are happy to have a crack at Maeda every so often as well, but he's not done too much wrong there, right? He's got it out from under his feet. It's broke to him. He's cracked it on target, and near enough point blank, Marshall's had a really strong wrist and kept that one out, and not just kept it out, but beat it away to safety as well. So, yeah, I felt Mikey Johnson's going to suffer because of past history, and he you know, he's erratic and he's got mixed end product. So, but the bigger picture he's dealing with is most fans are sitting there going, how bad is our recruitment being? That's what we're relying on coming off the bench when it's 0-0 at a venue, and we're expecting a front three of Mikey Johnson, and Jamesy Forrest 10, 11, 12 years down his career, with David Turnbull in the hole behind him. But that's the front four we're hoping to change the game. It's pretty damning.
Just pick up the point there. One thing for Mikey Johnson for me in the years gone by was his decision making was abysmal. So like he'd do all the fancy tricks and flicks and beat the player, possibly not all the time, but sometimes. And then he'd either kick the ball at the park or shoot when it wasn't on, or So I kind of felt once he got over that initial first 5-10 minutes, wee bit of enthusiasm, I thought his decision making was a bit better. Like he was actually trying to cut it back and square it, and he was shooting when it was sort of a bit more appropriate. Obviously, a bit sort of obviously had a bit of butterflies that first 5 minutes or so, and then so once that got out of his system, it was a wee bit better. I'm not saying he's the answer. I'm just saying that I don't think his performance was as bad as some people on social media would make out. Again,
well, no, I think you can happily say that in the 25-30 minutes, included that on time that he was on, he contributed a hell of a lot more than Palmer did. So that's the benchmark, right? The benchmark isn't Jota anymore because he's gone.
It's gone.
The benchmark is this squad and who's producing. And unfortunately, until Labada comes back, we've got issues in the wide positions. This kind of game doesn't suit Maeda because there's no space to run into. But we persist in playing him. Even something tactical like putting him up front next to Kyogo. But I know Kyogo will need rest and he'll probably start on Wednesday night. But But just changing the front three near enough within the space of 5-10 minutes and hoping that was going to be, there's a lot of stuff online, is Roger sending a message to the board? And he might be. But if he is, that's a pretty bold game with 3 points up for grabs. Like, I know we've got a cushion. But I'm pretty cynical, but I'm not as cynical as to think that that's his number one priority.
He's playing what he's got. He's playing what he's got available to him. I mean, ultimately, whether he's playing games or not, I mean, ultimately, that's all he's got on the bench. It's not like he's holding players back. Like, there's no one else. It's not like, Abada's raring to go. He's still injured, and in an ideal world, all right, he's your, either Abada comes in or Palmer or Maeda, and then you've got basically 3 guys playing for 2 positions, and that's okay. But then as soon as you get one injury, then you're like, all right, now for the next guy to step up. And at the moment, we thought that was going to be Yang. That's not panned out. Rogers seems to have panned around to James Forrest. He seems to be trusting him at the moment. Seems to be his go-to. And then in fairness to Forrest, I mean, he absolutely connected with that volley. He connected with it too well. I mean, basically, the one that hits the underside of the crossbar and bounces out. I mean, that goes in. He's a hero. We win 1-0, or, at the very least, we think you win 1-0 from there. And again, we're having we're having a slightly different conversation than what we're having right now. So, I mean, it's just, football's all about, fine margins, and there's a cliche if ever there was one, but it's just, it didn't quite come off. And I guess for me, the 2 substitutions I felt contributed the least were O and David Turnbull. It is a concern that we don't have an alternate striker, and I know you can't have another Kyogo sitting on the bench gathering dust, break glass in case of emergency, but on you come. But I just feel at the moment the drop off from Kyogo down to O at the moment is just, the gulf is too big. And I don't know how you bridge that, because without O getting more game time, so it's a catch-22, because you need to win games. So you need to play Kyogo. But then at the same time, how does O get any better if he doesn't get game time, or he's only getting 10, 15 minutes at the end of matches? And then in a situation like this, where it's nothing each, and we actually need him to score the winner, it's like, no, you're not coming on at 3-0. You're coming on at nothing each. You've got to actually create something here. And he never really got a sniff or got near anything. And like you say, David Turnbull, I mean, that attempted pitch and wedge crap, I mean, what on earth? I mean, that's just somebody who isn't very bright. I mean, the percentage, like you say, the percentages of that must be so low. He's thinking that's my best option in that situation. And you're just thinking, you're dreaming. And there's a reason why you've completely dropped out of favour, and you're now the fifth or sixth choice. Because after that, I'd definitely be thinking Holmes should be definitely back into the reckoning before he does, because that's just rubbish. And took Bernardo off, and Bernardo was gassed. Like, he was, he put a shift in. But did you see any increased tempo when David Turnbull came on? No, it was like he'd played 90 minutes already as well. So I'm trying to be sort of glass half foolish, but I just kind of feel some of the subs got slathered just because of their name, where some of the subs actually didn't really do what's on the tin, what they're actually supposed to be doing. But your thoughts on our forward situation? Because Kyogo had a quiet game as well. He never really got.
Well, this is a point, right? And I think I've defended O predominantly because of his performance last year, right? His performance last year, yes, he's raw. Yes, he bundles himself around a bit. But last season, with decent service coming from the wide areas, he was scoring a goal every 80 odd 90 minutes. Obviously, he wasn't on for very long in most games, but that was the scoring rate. He hasn't scored yet this season, but he's hardly had any minutes. This is the first time I think he's had close to sort of half 20-25 minutes when we haven't been down to 10 or 9 men, which is the previous case he's been. And he had zero service. Zero, and Kyogo had zero service, right? There was, so you could, I don't like, I know people. This my issue with the O situation is he's becoming another whipping boy. Celtic fans love a whipping boy. They love Johnson. Mikey Johnson's one. We can all put James Forrest was one for a good chunk of time. Now he's all considering we can come back in that space. As a fan base, we do tend to sort of fasten on to a player or a couple of players and unreasonably hammer them. And as far as I was concerned, yes, there's a big drop off, but he isn't getting the service. I don't think he's had service in any of really any of it. And yes, he's had a couple of chances he's snatched at, or goalkeepers have got out and blocked him and stuff. But they are. I don't think you would say that they're high expectations of chances that should be getting tucked away. He certainly had nothing in this game, and he's a big lad, right? And he's proved he can throw himself into diving headers last season. He scored goals if you mix it up. Give him some service. Like if you put him on, you've got to change how you play. You've got to James Forrest can swing across. Mikey Johnson can swing across. David Turnbull, for all his faults, is a good delivery of balls in the box. O'Reilly was still on the pitch. I don't think we try to find him in the air once in the 25 minutes he was on. So I don't know. I just think it's a bit of an issue that if you've got a player who you can throw the ball into, or ask him to hold up and link, or throw it in and let him bat on charge, because we don't really play like that with Kyogo, and I feel like there wasn't the will and switch to play to O's strengths. So, but that overall striker situation is an issue. But I think your point is right. Like, and I think when are you going to give him the extra game time? And it's a point I made 2 or 3 weeks ago. I said we need to kill games earlier and get them done and dusted, so we can get some of these fringe players on for longer and give them the minutes when there's less pressure on them. And then hopefully they'll get some goals and assists and get some confidence up, and then you can trust them more at the sort of business end of matches.
I just think the other thing that he suffers from is that he usually comes on when the wide players have changed. So he's not playing with our first choice wingers. So he comes on, but he's also contending with the fact that it might be like Yang and Forrest on the wings. Yep. And then the service drops off. So he's trying to impress. He's got 2 wingers that are giving him probably less service than Kyogo gets throughout a match normally. So it all sort of translates through, and then he's probably got David Turnbull in the midfield, or a reduced midfield as well. So he's not getting the throughput that your starting striker gets. So I guess the only way to combat that is to actually throw him a start. But then it's hard to justify that, because you're saying, well, he's not playing well. But a part of that circumstance of how he's introduced into games and where he's coming on in games, and it's just, I feel like it's just potentially around the corner for him. Until he gets one goal and he'll get a few, but just at the moment, and I think that game in general, like you say, it was devoid of chances. Like we just weren't really creating anything really. I mean, it was, Hibs didn't really press out much. They sort of kept a very rigid sort of shape, and they made it hard for us. And they obviously had a game plan after getting pumped 4-0 against the Huns last week. So obviously they set up to be a lot more defensive and really just try and hit in the counter. And I say they did that maybe once or twice in the game, but they really were just more defensively minded, and obviously got a point. So they'll be happy enough with that. But we've got to have a way to get around that. And unfortunately, slow tempo football is not going to be the way. And if you've got players like Palmer who aren't naturally quick, skipping past defenders, then it's going to be a long old day. And like you say, Maeda is not really his game either when teams are sitting deep. So if you've got both your wingers are relatively ineffective, and they're putting the clamp on your central midfielders, then where's your game plan? Where's the goals going to come from? Because we're absolutely abysmal at set pieces as well. Our free kicks and corners at the moment are dreadful. We don't look like we're going to score from anything at the moment. Like, it just, Matt O'Reilly wasn't, he failed to clear the front man on a couple of, hitting the wall on a couple of free kicks. A couple of these corners didn't clear the first man either. And if you at least you don't build a bit of pressure, you've really got to be getting them in the mixer and at least applying a bit of pressure. But again, it's just something that it's just one more facet to our game at the moment that we're not utilising as well as maybe certain other teams in the competition are. So anyway, a brief interlude, but just feel free to like and follow us on all the various social media platforms you can see below. We're on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, that thing called X now. Please like this video.
Threads as well, I believe.
Beg your pardon?
We're
on Threads?
Threads
we're on
as well.
We are on Threads. I'm not on Threads, but I'm on Twitter, so you can follow me at amag1984. Paul, what's your handle on Twitter?
It's just that Paul Massey.
Paul Massey.
Yeah.
Okay, there you go. So if you want to
Early
listen to
adopter.
Paul, Paul talks a lot more than I do, but I just usually like memes and funny things. But Paul actually usually has something to say, so feel free to give us a follow. I suppose we'll just do a wee pivot away from Easter Road and just quickly talk about Hearts' late capitulation at Mordor at 1-0 up with, well, it was the 89th minute, they were 1-0 up, and then somehow, 9 minutes of injury time, a penalty, a late goal, a free kick that definitely wasn't a free kick for Rangers, which led to the goal. Paul, I mean, you take the tinfoil hat off, put it on, I don't know, but I mean, part of me never expected Hearts to give Rangers a game anyway. So, like, the fact that they got it to 1-0 with 89 minutes is a surprise in itself. But obviously the way it ends up, you're kind of thinking, well, what could have been? But any thoughts? Like, let's try not to be too.
Well, I haven't even watched the highlights. Yeah, look, I haven't even watched the highlights. I'll enjoy the highlights if they lose or drop points or there's something calamitous. But once I know that they've dug themselves out a hole, I tend not to bother.
John beaten to the rescue.
Yeah, and look, 2 penalties, both in injury time of each half. Sort of, if you were inclined to assume that refs that hang out round their bars were inclined to sort of get them out of jail if they could, then that would look reasonably suspicious. But obviously it's Scottish football, so there's nothing to see here. I think he played extra minutes at the end of the first half as well. But look, we've seen that happen before. There's potentially a rationale for that. Like I say, I haven't watched it. So to your point, I didn't expect Hearts to, they rarely put up much of a fight. So I certainly wasn't expecting much. I saw the result. I went, all right, okay. And then I obviously saw the controversy of penalties and the like. So, but look, I guess it's been a relatively downbeat show, I would say. I think the thing that I would say is that with the run of fixtures we've had and they've had after 10 matches, we've nearly played everyone. St Mirren on Wednesday will round out the first quarter of the season. If you had asked any Celtic fan after 10 games, would you having gone to Pittodrie, Ibrox, Tynecastle, and Easter Road, if you would take a 5-point lead, there's nobody out there that's saying no to that. You bite your hand off for that. So the fact we've had a couple of games, it's just a bit disappointing. We've dropped points. The bigger picture is things are going pretty well considering. And yes, we've got some challenges ahead, particularly around injuries and squad depth. But the next run of fixtures is going to be quite interesting because we've got the kind of element of fixtures coming up. And so, you would think that gap should be maintained or even stretched. And if we're going in with a bigger gap than 5 points into the turn of the year, you would be pretty confident from there. So there's a long way to go, but I think, at this point in the season, pretty happy with what's been achieved so far. If circle back quickly to the striker situation, we've got a big challenge coming up because there's a pretty good chance will get selected for Korea and Kyogo and Maeda will get selected for Japan, and they'll all be off to the Asian Cup. So I know there's a major shout to say we need another striker, but it's not even philosophical. We do need another striker because neither of our 2/3 strikers will be available come January. So yeah, we definitely have a challenge there. I don't know what the answer is. I've again, as is always the case when things are challenging around the backup striker, there's been plenty more shouts about Giakoumakis. Why did we let him go? He's the saviour, etc., etc. I tweeted this week that this weekend it's a total misnomer as far as I'm concerned. One, he's long gone. Two, he wanted to go. Like, he wanted to go because he wasn't first pick. And there's not a Celtic fan, again, I'd be surprised if a Celtic fan thinks that given what's happened since he went,
He was better
that they
than
would be
Kyogo.
picking him over Kyogo. So the challenge you've got with a player as good as Kyogo is you need to find a striker who is willing to be second string. Basically, you're saying to that person, you are a guaranteed bench warmer unless he gets injured or tired. And that's a pretty hard situation to be in, right? You're either looking for a youngster, which we've got or you're looking for a seasoned pro
career.
At the end of the career that's still got a bit left in them. And I think that's what we'll end up with for January, at least. I think we'll loan somebody probably from the Prem or the Championship that has hopefully got goals in him and got another 6 to 12 months left in him. And
I can tell you who we're not signing anyway. We're not signing Lawrence Shankland because he never really celebrated his goal against Rangers last night. Whereas last week he was like punching the badge and doing all the things when he scored against us and there were 2-1 down, 3-1 down at that point. So there's probably a bit of a shout there that he might be moving to the Huns at Christmas, after Christmas, but we'll see. We'll watch that one and see. They add it to the pile of strikers they've already got. Well,
just out of badness, I would sign him. I'd sign him just out of badness. He'd plug it. He'd do a job in the league until he'd do a job in the league to cover the players that are going. It stops him going to them, and he's better than what they've got.
He's probably the best. He's probably the best striker in the league outside of.
And I know people think that's controversial, but it goes back to what Jock Stein used to say. He was asked that question years ago. Obviously, if there was a Catholic and a Protestant of equal ability, who would you sign? And he said, "Well, I'll sign the Protestant because they won't sign the Catholic." So it's true. So it's the religion thing's going these days, to at least at that level. But he is obviously a player they would fancy. So take him off their hands. Only if it was sort of not silly money, but
no.
I my tongue is a bit in my cheek. I don't think that will happen, but and I think you're right. He probably will find his way there at some point if they can muster some cash to sprinkle across the Tynecastle. But we definitely need to get somebody in over the early part of for the window reopening, basically.
Yes, we do. Because otherwise, his maid is maybe away as well. So that's your whole front three, basically. So it doesn't leave you with much. You don't want to be going up front with Mikey Johnson up front. That's probably a bridge too far. There'll be a riot at Celtic Park with that one.
Well, look, I guess the one. Sorry to interrupt. The one thing that could happen if he's back and fit, which he might be in December, is Abada could potentially play through the middle. But you're probably going to want him back on the wing. So we'll be signing a striker of some degree,
our other missing Australian in Marco Tilio. We don't know where he's at the moment either, but probably a big ask to ask him to lead the line. Said he's not played any first team football with Celtic as of yet.
He's more likely to come on in a wing, but given the comments that Rogers made recently, you'd think that he seems like he's quite far away from a first pick at the minute, which is strange. Sorry. I'll let you.
I was going to say, any other business, Paul, before we wrap up?
Well, yeah. The one point I was going to make there was, however downbeat we may feel as a Celtic fan, as I say, we're 5 points clear. We've had a bad run. We've got better fixtures to come. Life could be a lot worse. You could either be an Aberdeen fan with the run that they're on, or you could be an Ajax fan. To be honest, Ajax dropped to the bottom of the Eredivisie with a defeat to PSV this weekend. So they are 5 losses in a row. That's a record for them. Never happened before. The manager got sacked. They've got an interim manager in, and they've dropped to the bottom of the league. Now, I assume that they will get somebody in who will dig them out of that hole. It's still really early in the season. But for Ajax to be bottom of the Eredivisie, that's a pretty incredible position that they find themselves in. So there's always somebody with a worse situation than us. That's my little it's my little polishing of this particular turd this week. But hopefully things will be better, and we need to bounce back because we've got a big game against St Mirren on Wednesday. So
and they thumped St Johnstone 4-0. I had St Mirren in my coupon. Unfortunately, Celtic and Livingston let me down because Livingston got a man sent off, and then all of a sudden they went 2-0 down to Dundee, which doesn't happen very often at the Spaghetti Head. But yeah, they fell in the hole, and obviously we didn't win anyway, so it was all a bit of a moot point. But gamble responsibly, people.
Never bet on your own team, because that's the next.
It's just I was just a multi. It was just a bit of a laugh. Anyway, what would I do? Man of the match, which is a bit hard this week, to be honest, because it was kind of like you could throw a lick of paint across pretty much the whole team. I would have thought. No one stood out for me, but Paul, maybe you'll help me, guide me. Who's your man of the match?
Well, you're right. It was pretty slim pickings, but whilst Hibs didn't create a lot of chances, when they did venture forward, they were marshalled extremely well by CCV predominantly. There's a lot of pace coming through that strike force, as I said at the beginning.
Yeah.
And for somebody he's quickish, but not the quickest, and would have known that he was, probably second best in that regard. He used his body positioning really well, his reading of the game really well. Just got his angles right, and like I say, marshalled the attackers that came near him really well. And as far as distribution goes from the back, his was the best of a bad lot, I would say. So whilst it's not a glowing man of the match, which you would quite often get from CCV, for me, he was the best player in a Celtic shirt on the day.
I agree with you, because I had a quick look at the Sky ratings before I came on, and Liam Stales actually scored a 7 out of 10. He was the highest rated Celtic player. CCV, McGregor, a whole load of them were on 6s. So obviously they looked at some maybe a wee bit different, but I'm going to agree. I thought CCV was solid, and yeah, snuffed out, whatever they whatever they coughed up, we sort of recycled possession, and yeah, it just made it look rather comfortable. Like you say, that pace can sometimes be quite troubling, but it really didn't really sort of bother as much. So you'd rather say that the positional sense of the centre half pairing was pretty solid. So I'm not saying CCV by default, but yeah, no, he probably deserves shades that one. So I started watching the first episode of the David Beckham documentary last night. So it was quite engaging. I mean, it always makes you feel sorry for England a little bit, but I kind of had to just pinch myself and say, no, they deserve all they get. And the link to the game during the week is that I didn't realize that when David Beckham got his red card against Argentina, who is the guy that feigned injury and got him sent off? Would it be a certain Atletico Madrid manager who didn't shake Brendan Rodgers' hand during the week? So bit of a dick move, but I sort of almost take it back a little bit, because he was responsible for England getting bundled out the World Cup. So yeah, it was interesting. And also, I wouldn't really think Glenn Hoddle will be too happy with that first episode either. They kind of painted him like a bit of a dick. So obviously his PR. I know, but I mean, maybe that's just true. But like his PR team obviously didn't get a heads up on that one, because he doesn't come out of that one looking terribly well. And then probably the other thing was I've started watching Gen V, which is a spin-off of The Boys, set in a sort of superhero school, same gratuitous violence and what you come to expect from that universe. But yeah, not bad. I'm a couple of episodes into that, so that's not a bad watch either. Paul, music, hit us with it. What you got?
Well, before I get to the music, I was sort of enforced binged that Beckham thing the other week, and I thought it was reasonably engaging, but I've sort of left feeling like you often do with documentaries about celebrities, is it's just a polish up job. You're supposed to, he's an exec producer, right? Like it's not going to be,
hard hitting.
Well, spoiler alert, Rebecca Lewis never gets mentioned by name in the whole thing.
Right.
So yeah, funnily enough, that's dusted over. It is sort of alluded to, but it gets dusted over pretty sweet. So bit of a puff piece is I'm on record as saying, but it's engaging enough, and there's some it's actually some quirky stuff later on, which is it's mildly entertaining. Music wise, we touched on the whole Rolling Stones Beatles thing last week, and Sean was talking about some of the Rolling Stones stuff, and that is because indeed, as I suspected, there is a new album. So the Stones last week released the album Hackney Diamonds, which I think the expectation is it'll be their last ever album. Again, they must be knocking on the door of their 80s, I think. Or certainly close. And the news is it's great. It's probably as good as anything they've done since the 70s. So that's probably half their career. And there's a bit of sort of friends joining in. So you got Paul McCartney's on the album, Elton John's on the album, and there's a song with Lady Gaga and Stevie Wonder on there as well. So, as well as they finish the whole thing with a cover. I think it's a Moody Blues song, or Muddy Waters song, maybe Rolling Stone Blues, kind of where they got the name. I think it's Muddy Waters, which is a really cool version as well, and that's how they finished the album. So yeah, that's my recommendation of the week: Hackney Diamonds, the likely last ever album by the Rolling Stones.
Fantastic. I'll definitely be at the Perth Celtic Supporters Club on Saturday night to take on Ross County. Paul, will you be there as well?
I think I will all be well.
Good.
Yeah, let's say yes to that.
Come up and say hello if you're in Perth, and if you do listen to the podcast or you do watch us, feel free to come up and say hello. It's always nice to get some feedback. That is all that's left for this evening. Thank you very much for watching and listening. And all that's left to say is hail, hail.
Hail, hail.